Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in just a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other Friday to explore a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God of all.
Happy New Year, you two.
Happy new decade.
Year. Happy new decade. Well, aren't people quibbling a little bit about that? Isn't next year the new decade?
Maybe
No?
you are, not me. I'm all in.
You're all in?
This is 2020.
Well, what do you guys think? How's the new year treating you so far?
I
Sarah?
mean, happy Epiphany. Like, are we not church-going people?
Oh, you're so churchy.
yes.
So holy.
yes. Epiphany.
Have you chalked your door? No, I haven't. But I do have a kid, and it's sitting on the counter. We're good. Yeah. I was sitting with my daughter the other day, and the light, it's like a little light in her bedroom, was right behind my head. And she was laying under me, and she looked up at me, and she's like, "Mama, you're growing a mustache." And I was like, 2020, here we come. I was just like, thank you.
RJ,
Amazing.
I think we can make an announcement here. I think you
Oh
can
my
tell
gosh.
our your
RJ's
adoring public.
pregnant.
Your adoring public.
Here comes baby number 4. No, definitely not. Yeah, it has been a crazy few weeks. I've had my final Sunday at St. Martin's Episcopal Church in Houston, Texas. And on Tuesday, January 14th, I will be installed as the rector of Holy Trinity Episcopal Church in West Palm Beach, Florida. Houston winters were just, I'd had enough. And so we're headed south. But yeah, so Tuesday the 14th is my installation, and then Sunday the 19th is my first Sunday. So if we got any Mockingcasters in South Florida, would love to. That's a Key and Peele joke, by the way.
Oh, is that
It is. I'd love to see you there. So crazy days in the Heyman household.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I mean,
It's
thank
amazing.
West Palm Beach just got a little more gracious. Let's put it that way. No, I'm thrilled. I think anyone who is down there, I'm jealous. I hope I'd like to be there on the 14th. I don't think I can, but
It's going to be fun. They're lovely people, so I'm really, really looking forward to it.
It's amazing. I happen
Yeah.
to be one of RJ's references, and
Yes.
and did tell them, and I meant it, that any church that gets RJ is going to be very, very lucky. So I'm super excited
Sweet of you,
for
Sarah. Thank you.
the family and for the church.
Yeah.
well, we all get to reunite in April at the New York City conference. So that is going to be super duper fun.
It is.
Well, it's the new year, which means people are back to the grind. I've heard about this week as sort of being the week that we launch into the rest of the year, and some
Back to
folks are
school.
having a easy time doing that. Some having a hard time. I thought we would sort of use this first 2020 Mockingcast to talk a little bit about the new year and the kind of hectic year opening thoughts that people have. One of the Atlantic ran a long article by Derek Thompson, 3 theories for why you have no time. Here is Derek. He says, one of the truisms of modern life is that nobody has any time. Everybody is busy, burned out, swamped, overwhelmed. So let's try a simple thought experiment. Imagine you came into possession of a magical new set of technologies that could automate or expedite every single part of your job. What would you do with the extra time? Maybe you'd pick up a hobby or have more children or learn to luxuriate in the additional leisure. But what if I told you that you wouldn't do any of those things? You would just work the exact same amount of time as before. He goes on to give 3 different reasons why this would be the case. He talks about better technology means higher expectations, and higher expectations create more work. In the 20th century, labor-saving household technology improved dramatically. Electric stoves made food prep faster. Automatic washers and dryers cut the time needed to clean a load of clothes. Refrigerators meant that housewives and the help didn't have to worry about buying fresh food every day. Each of these innovations could have saved hours of labor, but none of them did. Technology made it much easier to clean a house to 1890s standards, but by mid-century, Americans didn't want that old house. They wanted a modern house with delicious meals and dustless windowsills and glistening floors. And this delicious and dustless glisten required a 40 to 50-hour work week, even with the assistance of modern tools. Expectations rose and work expanded to fill the available time. He says that's called Parkinson's law. But kind of second reason he gives, which is a little bit more germane to us, is that a lot of modern overwork is class and status maintenance for this generation and the next. In the past few decades, childcare has been the fastest growing component of housework. Since the 1980s, American parents, and particularly college-educated mothers and fathers, have nearly doubled the amount of time they spend raising, teaching, driving, and helping their kids. The economist Valerie Ramey chalks it up to
How is that possible? Sorry, I just feel like I just spend no time with my kids. Every time I hear that, I'm like, how is that possible?
People must have really not spent any time before.
I mean, right? Like you were just drinking Manhattan, smoking cigarettes, watching whoever was on the Tonight Show. I mean,
it's just Archie Bunker. Everyone was that way.
Yes.
Well, she says that there's a rugrat race led by parents devoting more hours to prepare their kid for competitive college admissions and a cutthroat labor force. Many young people concerned with burnout don't have kids, but their motivations are an extension of the same impulse behind concerted parenting. They, too, feel like participants in a pseudo-meritocratic rat race, and they're terrified of losing status, class, or future income. Young YouTube stars work to exhaustion to meet the expectations of an algorithm that prizes daily content. Lawyers and consultants work overtime to prove to their bosses that they will sacrifice every shred of their personal life to help their firms crush global rivals. Some of these rat race participants might truly be on the brink of financial emergency, but a lot of them are yuppie workists who have made a secular religion out of the pursuit of status and professional fulfillment. Their overwork isn't so much about avoiding poverty as it is about avoiding the psychically difficult prospect that life in this generation and the next isn't an infinite escalator. That's a lot. Do you guys feel like you have a lot of time or no time, or what's your relationship to your watch?
I mean, I don't think anybody feels like they have a lot of time. I don't know. RJ, do you feel like you have a lot of time?
No.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think anybody is sitting around like, oh, I have so much extra time. Like there's this story that I don't want to tell because I try to only tell stories that I can mask really well that weren't recent. But
You don't do a very good job at that.
What's coming?
I don't. I really don't. So there's like a school that one of our kids goes to, and there's like a whole week where they have like themed dress days. And that week might have happened the first week they were back in school after Christmas break. And every day was a different theme. And one of the theme days was Twin Day. And at last count, I have 54 text messages on my phone from mothers discussing Twin Day and what all of the children should wear to match in the classroom. And when I see things like that, all I can think is, what were we doing 100 years ago that wasn't this? Because I'm sure it was more fulfilling than this is. Like, I'm just like, how are we spending our energy on this? And also, like, it makes me very, I don't know, it makes me think about how, like, people in their 20s don't want to have kids. Because I think if we're modeling this, like, high-level anxiety, right, in every facet of our lives, for our kids, like, I wouldn't want to have kids. Like, and I don't know, I think about housework and how, I kind of will get a certain thing done, a room that I'll feel really good about. I just cleaned our son's room out, and he proceeded to find the trash bag, pull stuff out of it, and put it back in his room. And I managed to not scream at him, which is just a sign of the Lord's sanctification in my life. But our daughter's room now, every time I walk into it, I get mad at her because there's this thing in my brain, and I don't know what this is about, that at any moment, Southern Living is just going to come by and just like a knock, knock, knock on my door and be like, Sarah, we'd love to take pictures of your house. Like, I'm like, who is going to see our daughter's bedroom? You know what I mean? Like, who is going to see? Why am I worried about this? Like, and there's all this projection about like, how is this affecting her sleep? And like, what is her childhood is full of plastic things and whatever. And that's there. But I honestly, like, the big thing for me, the thing I think about all the time is, if I die, oh my God, are the neighbors going to see what our house looks like? Like, that goes through my brain like on a fairly regular basis. And our house is like generally pretty clean, but like there are parts of it that are like total, just like a holder for personal shame. You know what I mean? And like, is that going to be exposed? I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of
I can relate to
thoughts.
everything you said. I work, my wife works, we have 3 kids. And my oldest son's a senior, and he's been crazy this year applying to colleges and everything. And at the same time, we keep on getting these emails and texts about all these parties that are being planned, for senior year. And it's like, who has time to plan these parties? Like, there's so much going, and God bless them, because it's going to be amazing. And you want to throw everything into your kid's senior year, but it's like, who has time to do this? And then even when I do have time, like, I try to sit down and relax, and all I can see around the house is everything, like the wall that needs to be repainted, or the carpet that needs to be vacuumed, or all the little projects that it's like, oh my gosh, when am I going to actually have the time and the energy to take care of the things that need to be taken care of? But what I loved about this article was just, what did they say? How the weight of expectation creates more work.
Yeah.
That's just perfect. The weight of expectation creates work. And that's what I feel. The expectation to throw all the parties, to do everything for the kids, to have the perfect house. And then I also thought about like my Dutch relatives who I see on Facebook, and they're like on vacation in Italy. And then like a month later, they're still on vacation in Italy. And I'm like, why? What am I doing not living in Holland with
have
like
you seen
6
their
months,
closets,
6 weeks?
though? Like, have you checked?
I don't know, man, but they're just always on vacation. They're always on vacation. I'm like, let me use my Dutch passport and just flee to the European Union. But it is all about societal and cultural education. You read these articles by people who went to live in Switzerland and were used to eating lunch at their desk until all their coworkers are like, are you insane? Like, stop, go take a walk and eat your lunch. So I'm sure they have their own societal pressures, but I can fantasize that there's no expectation anywhere but in sort of, middle/upper class America, which I know is not the case.
I mean, it definitely puts a lie, though, to the idea that if I could just get this product, or if I could just get this job, then I would have more free time, because it never works out that way. I mean, especially if your connection to your job has any element of self-justification, and we all know that Americans, it's a huge source of pride, and that's what Derek Thompson has written about elsewhere, the secular religion of workism, that your work is going to remain static. In fact, it's going to increase no matter what the demands are, because it's serving a psychological, spiritual need for you, and so it's going to go up. I mean, Sarah, it was so interesting when you said that, like, what were they doing 100 years ago? We just went and saw the new Little Women, which I think was so good. I just think it was funny. Everything I want in a movie. Finally, a movie about these amazing women that doesn't include like just really doofy men. It's like with so much grace and tears. Anyway, that's a different story. I think it's wonderful, but I left that movie, and of course I'm coming at it from my own context, but thinking, gosh, that's conquered in like the 1890s sure seemed like a much better place much more humane
Right?
place to live. And I know they had problems, and I
Yes.
know that there was
Yes.
civil war and everyone dying, and
Yes.
No emails to answer.
no emails to
No
answer,
feeds
but
to keep up
I just
with.
watched
No,
it
yeah.
when they were playing. They had to make up games and all this stuff. And I've also heard, though, that Louisa May Alcott, like, one of the reasons she wrote the book is because she had such a terrible life, and she wanted to write a jolly tale so that her life didn't actually resemble that. But it was still, it felt like more than nostalgia. It felt like a more sort of properly ordered way to live.
You know what I would love to contrast that against? The Netflix Kevin Hart series. Have you guys watched this at all?
No.
It's so powerful. But watching that man work. Somebody says 25/8 in the description of him, to do all the things, and then to struggle with obviously all of the personal fallout that he's had in front of everyone is just. It made me unable to breathe. It was like literally the opposite of Little Women. Like when I was like, oh my God, this looks, this man has amassed all this power, all this clout, all this wealth, enough that he could withstand, real personal stuff happening in his life falling apart in front of everyone. And he seems miserable on some level. I don't know. It's just, I do want to say, like, and this is like, I check my privilege, but we do have a woman that comes and cleans our house and folds our laundry. And that honestly is like changed my life in a lot of ways. And I'm very thankful for it. And there's like an ongoing joke in my household where my husband will complain that he doesn't know where like a spatula is. And he'll be like, oh, and he'll say the woman who cleans our house's name, who I will not say her name on air. And I will look at him with complete honesty and say, I will leave you before I leave her.
I know a lot of people that feel that same way.
Yeah, I mean, it is like to have some of that burden helped. I mean, I honestly feel this like weird kinship with her where it's like, oh my gosh, like you're making it possible for me, but it is still like you're making it possible for me to do other stuff, right?
Yeah,
That's
and
right,
honestly,
that's right.
I know a lot of people with a lot of housekeepers, and it seems like now you have them coming once a week, and then soon you're going to be like, well, I can't live without them twice a week.
Oh,
and then,
yeah,
Then all of a
totally.
sudden it's like, we can't live without someone who's live-in, and that's all of a sudden it's like, what planet are we living on? Because
Yeah.
watch Little Women. It seems like they didn't have any servants. It was just
Right.
Beth. Sorry.
That's actually our cleaning lady's name. Just kidding. Go, Arthur.
Perfect. The other thing this made me think of, and I think it's related, a friend of mine who's a therapist said something really profound recently. He said, humans require, there's something about people, they require a certain amount of worry and suffering. No matter what you do, they're going to want to worry and suffer a certain amount. And so when you no longer have to worry about eating or money or cleaning, you're just going to find new things to worry about
Twin
and to
day.
suffer over. Yeah, and it's the same sort of thing. Like you will never stop. You'll never stop working less,
Yeah.
and you'll never stop worrying
Yeah.
less or suffering less. You'll just find new things to worry about and suffer over, which I found to be just very insightful and true and sort of, hopeless in a way.
It's also
but
biblical,
liberating.
though, right? It's so biblical. I mean, you know what I mean? Like there's so much talk about just like our like base level being one of suffering, like and confusion and lostness. And I mean, like, that's
I am with you guys. I'm thinking about that Andrew Sullivan from a few years ago who was talking about the distraction and the busyness of modern life, and that he was contrasting that with church, and his experience of church growing up, the Mass, he was Catholic, was that it was calm and that it was quiet and that it was slow and it was deliberate. And he says the crisis, I mean, one of the things he says in there, and I'm not sure it's 100% true, but there's truth in it, is that the crisis of faith or secularization or the religious nuns or whatever you want to call it has less to do with people sort of making a decision and more to do with there never having any silence in which faith might be born or nurtured. And I think that there's some truth to that. I can't help but think although I do believe everything that we're saying and what Derek is saying is that if there's a psychological need, a spiritual need, that people are, they know that they're overworked, they know that they're overburdened, they're not going to quit because it's serving a greater purpose. It's giving them enoughness, whatever you want to say,
It's
and
justifying their existence.
And yet, it also
Yeah.
feels at the same time that some of our technological devices are making life a little bit faster. And just like the more, once you had an electric oven, then all of a sudden you had to cook more meals and faster. If you have a device in your hand that says you can answer an email at 12 p.m. or a.m., then you have to. And
You
I think
must,
that,
yeah.
And it also reminds me of another thing that Ada Calhoun, she's a wonderful writer. We've talked about her before. She's got a new book coming out called Why We Can't Sleep. It's about Gen X women, anxiety and sort of uptick in insomnia. And she was talking in NPR, and she said, this is one thing that a sociologist who studies the generations told me is that our generation, Gen X and millennials, tend to judge ourselves based on everything. So, in the past, the question was, how nice is your home or how good are you at your job? Now it's like all of the things. So it's, are you a good parent? Are you good at work? Is your house nice? Are you in shape? Are you recycling? It's like every single factor in your life you have to excel at. And I think that level of pressure is unsustainable.
That's so good. I mean, I completely relate to that. Like yeah, I mean, in like kind of painful ways. It's like it feels like it all has to be at a 10, and it can't be. And the prayer and the hope is that like we can let those parts of ourselves fall apart, knowing I'm working on a sermon for Sunday. So there's that beautiful text in the Old Testament about like how God doesn't discard the bruised reed. Do you know what I mean? Just like knowing that like we aren't discarded. And I love it's like, and doesn't quench the dimly lit wick, like that we're, even though like our light is really dim, that like that God doesn't toss it out. I don't know. I try to take some comfort in that, because like, I mean, I have a garage so full of recycling right now, and it's and I've had neighbors comment on how much recycling we have.
Don't die, Sarah.
I mean,
Don't die. It's going to be bleak when they come in.
it's just a garage
She was
full
crushed
of
under the weight
bruised
of
reeds, you know?
aluminum
Like,
cans.
Oh, God. You guys have to come clean my house if I die. This is where we are.
Let me say, it's funny what you say about having to be a 10 and everything, because I remember when we first had children and someone said, and we had kids pretty young, right? Like I was 25. And they're like, what's different? And I said, well, I'm kind of used to being like an A employee, an A friend, and an A husband. And now I cannot be an A everything.
Yeah.
Like if I'm being a good father, something has to give a little bit. And I need to be a little more comfortable with like being a B plus in certain areas of my life. But you know what? I don't feel that way anymore. Now I feel 17 years later, like not being perfect at everything is not really an option.
Right.
Honestly, which makes me wonder, like, was I wiser when I was 25, or has the culture changed,
like,
or the
world
stakes
was so much
higher, or
slower. I don't
was
know.
it though? Just 17 years
Yes,
ago, was it
the
that
world
much
was
slower?
slower
I guess it
17
was.
years
Like,
ago. Yes.
it was. I didn't have 10 different streaming services.
I mean, the world we're describing, though, is one where the pressure for perfection has got to be vented somehow.
Mhm.
And either it will be vented by, tearing down people online, or, grabbing, hurting someone, or it'll be vented, I think, in some avenue of grace, which is what we're involved in. But I also think that people we're so chained to the wheel that it's not like we're free to choose these things. Usually the wheels have to come on the bus. And this sort of leads me to our second article, which is by Catherine Miller in BuzzFeed. It came out in October, the late October, but it sums up the decade in a lot of ways that are kind of alarming. She says, the 2010s broke our sense of time. The 2010s broke our sense of time. The touch and the taste of the 2010s was non-linear acceleration, always moving, always faster, but torn this way and that way, pushed forward and pulled back under. The 2000s were a bad decade, full of terrorism, financial ruin, and war. The 2010s were different. somehow more disorienting, full of molten anxiety, racism, and moral horror shows. Maybe this is a reason for the disorientation. Life had run on a certain rhythm of time and logic. And then, at 100 different entry points, that rhythm and that logic shifted a little, sped up, slowed down, or disappeared until you could barely remember what time it was. She gives the example of television, how it used to come on, sequentially, and now it comes on all at once. And not only does it come on, does all of House of Cards drop on one day, or as it were,
Cheer.
What am I watching?
Cheer.
Cheer. That's what we're all watching right now. It's all available on one day. Witcher, but also everything else that's ever been out is available. So you can be binging Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then binge.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Friends.
While you're checking your feed.
While you're checking your feed, and you're getting so this is she says we all know what's changed. What really happened in the 2010s. The internet is no longer a place you go. Who we are on the phone and in the walking world have merged. This is why algorithmic time is so disorienting. And she, by the way, she talks about the Twitter feed, and the moment that Twitter stopped being a sequential feed of things and it started prioritizing stuff it thought you would like. It started weighting things according to and the way things went viral. You would miss things that came up, but you would see more of other things. This is why algorithmic time is so disorienting and why it bends your mind. Everything good, bad, and complicated flows through our phones. And for those not living some hippie Walden trip, we operate inside a technological experience that moves forward and back and pulls you with it. Using a phone is tied up with the relentless perpendicular feeling of living through the Trump presidency. The algorithms that are never quite with you in the moment, the imperishable supply of new Instagram stories, the scrolling through what you said 6 hours ago, the 4 new texts, the absence of texts, that text from 3 days ago that has warmed up your entire life, the 4 versions of the same news alert. You can find yourself wondering why you're seeing this now, knowing too well why it is so. You can feel amazing and awful, exult in and be repelled by life in the space of seconds. The thing you must say, the thing you've been waiting for, it's always there, pulling you back under again and again and again. Who can remember anything anymore? Happy New Year!
New year, new you.
Yeah, New Year, new you.
I feel like I've just had myself explained to me, especially in the sense of not having a grasp on time. I mean, RJ, when you were just saying, like, is it that different from 17 years ago? And I hear this, and I'm like, actually, it's that different. It's crazy different. It's so much a part of who we are. There are days when I feel sort of in the worst possible way that I could go into a surgery room and a doctor could like just knit my cell phone to my body, and that would be appropriate for how much it's connected to me, which is really terrifying. And I don't know. I worry about, I was talking to a friend the other day about kind of like trying to not respond as much. And I don't know how to do that. I mean, I'm trying to read a lot of stuff about how to not respond as much. I have a good therapist. There's certain cognitive behavioral therapy stuff you can do. And some of that is helpful because there are these things that will circulate, in the Episcopal Church world that I kind of inhabit in a real way because, I'm married to a priest. I'm a priest. That feels so important. And what's so fascinating to me is I was on the phone with this friend who is in a completely different world. He's in the theater world in Houston, completely different world. And he was saying to me this thing that sort of happened in the art world in Houston that was, all over his feed and everyone's really upset about. And he kind of half commented and then like there was just outrage directed to him. And I was like, oh my God, that's literally what happens on things in my denomination, right? Like that is the actual, like that's the A plus B equals C. Like Christians, we're not better. You know what I mean? We're not doing it better. We may be doing it worse. And like, how do we not engage in all of it? I mean, there was this really fascinating thing that went around last week that everyone is sharing about. Oh my God, I can't even believe it. I'm so bored just saying this sentence out loud. About the right day to do Epiphany. There's you could do it on, I know, I'm just like, I'm dying on the inside. But it's like, if you do it, don't do it on Sunday when everybody's there, do it on Monday. And, part of your ordination vows is to uphold blah, blah, blah. And you could be defrocked for this. It's like this crazy kind of hyperbolic thing. And I was like, am I supposed to take this personally and enter into this rage? Or like, can I just not? Can I just not? And it's like, for me, sure, CBTs, how all these things are helpful. But when I read stuff like
CBT
this,
and
like,
CBD.
I literally, CBT and CBD, do them together. I don't, because you'll probably be too confused to do the therapy part. But I think, I don't know, I don't know how people do it without the gospel. I mean, I used to say that when my Meemaw was alive and we talk on the phone about like whatever. Meemaw and I would just like shoot the shit. I would say, I don't know how people do it without Jesus. And she was like, I don't either. And that's when I hear stuff like this, because you can give me all the mindfulness stuff. And I love a lot of stuff. It's really helpful. But at the end of the day, the thing that actually saves me is not the thing that redirects my attention, which is what so many things, are meant to do to help us kind of get out of these patterns of staring at our phones or, associating with our online personalities, right? There's all this stuff that's redirect your attention. What I actually need is something that just like sweeps the table of my brain. Do you know what I mean? That just says like, this isn't even who you are. This isn't even who you belong to. And that's actually that's the only place I get relief. And in that moment, I'm able to see like the reality of God's time and how specific and well knit in my mother's womb I was, and how I can find like actual rest there. So it's a little sad, honestly, to sometimes read stuff like this, because I just think like, oh, I wish these people knew. I feel like such a Baptist from my childhood, but God bless them, they have their merits. I wish these people knew who Jesus was. I don't know.
I was thinking about 17 years ago, and I was thinking about all of this in terms of just how my wife and I, like the TV we've watched, and how 17 years ago when we were living in an apartment in New York and we had two small children, we had Netflix, but at that point it was, 3 DVDs you got in the mail at a time.
Yeah.
And we had one TV,
Yeah.
and we would, we watched like the entire Ken Burns New York documentary series together on DVD, which is weird, And then we watched, Battlestar Galactica and Friday Night Lights, and now I skip forward to today, and not only are we sort of binging our own separate things on our own separate screens in different rooms, but then I think about the two most recent shows I've watched, which are Watchmen and that Apple Plus series For All Mankind, the space thing. And what's interesting about both those series is that they're both reimagined kind of versions of our reality. It's almost exactly what this article is talking about. They're series that don't take place in the past or the future or the present. They're in a different present than we're currently living, like a modified present. And so they have this anachronistic sort of universal quality that is at once like, it's somewhat specific, but it's also completely out of time. And it totally corresponds to what this article is talking about. So I don't know what that is worth, but it is true how the sense of sequence, the sense of pacing, the sense of time. I mean, maybe the only thing that pulls me back into it is like sports a little bit.
Yeah, well, actually,
like we're going to the playoffs.
I was thinking about
going
you.
through the playoffs. We're coming up on the national championship game.
Oh, that's so interesting. That still like has.
And those are the only things that people watch together. They don't.
Yes.
They watch sports together. They still do that.
Yeah. I hate sports, and I watch them with my husband.
Yeah, because they're still group experiences. And also the benefit of sports is that when I'm watching them, I'm not thinking about the wall that needs to be painted or the rug that needs to be vacuumed. They're a little bit of an escape from the pressure of existence and the expectation of existence. I can sort of escape for a few hours.
I was just thinking about like how my husband doesn't have that luxury, because I'll sit there and like try to talk to him during it, and he gets this very specific look on his face. It's like, oh my God, this is my one moment. Because I'm like, how about that recycling?
At halftime, maybe if you're lucky.
Exactly. Yeah.
I keep thinking about that new Reductress, the humor website. They ran a sort of info article the other day called 5 noise canceling headphones that do nothing to drown out your inner monologue.
We can take you to
like
vineyards in
everyone's
Italy,
trying
but
to-
we can't address the.
I think it's true.
It's gonna be you in the pictures.
And it's you gotta think. I always hear sometimes it leaves me cold. Around Christmas time, you hear about God entering into human life, and that leaves me warm. But then people say human history and time and all this stuff, and you'd be like, well, okay. I mean, that doesn't one entail? Isn't that redundant? Of course, it's time. But maybe maybe that aspect of the incarnation is going to become more radical. It's going to become God actually entered into time at a specific time,
It's so specific.
not at a bingeable, 19. I saw another meme this week that said, it's so weird that the year 2000 was 20 years ago, and so were the 1980s. Like it all feels like it's at the same
It does.
time, and it's collapsing together. I don't know what that necessarily means when it comes to the gospel, except for that we do experience we do experience our death sequentially, and that's not something that can really be gotten around.
I think there's also, this goes back to the first article, there's something oppressive about having to make every day count. It's like you sort of want to live one day at a time, and in some ways you want to let time pass and sort of just live your life, and that allows things to go a little bit more quickly. But then there's all this pressure to just make the absolute most of every single moment that causes everything to slow down in a way that's not terribly helpful. At least I feel that in my life, and
Oh, RJ, no, you're totally right. I mean, I know this won't be a popular contrast with the listeners, but again, Kevin Hart is the opposite of Little Women. And if you watch the Kevin Hart thing on Netflix, that guy wakes up every day. Like, how am I going to be the best possible version of myself? Who am I going to sign to a movie? What stand-up comedy do I need to do? And then you watch Little Women and you're just like, I need to try to knit. Like, who can teach me how to knit? It's just, there's something.
I want to write a letter.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to receive one for the next 3 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it leads into what is our final piece, which is really a sermon. I don't think really ever read someone else's sermon like this, but it's really powerful. It's by a Episcopal minister named Lonnie Lacey. Lonnie, if you're listening, hello. Lonnie was at our one of our conferences recently, and then this sort of made the round. I
didn't know that.
Yeah, he was at our conference last year. He's in Georgia. He wrote this. It's called "What We Hold" is the name of the sermon, and it's quite remarkable. I'm going to read a good portion of it, but I've cut it down. This is how he writes. He says, "This may sound odd, but one of the most important things anyone ever said to me when I was still training to be a pastor was this: honey, whatever that is you're doing, you got to put it down and come hold this baby." What? Put it down and come hold this baby. I was a brand new chaplain intern at Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. I was all of 24 years old, just 2 years out of college. I had just arrived at the hospital and been told that the floor I would be covering was the neonatal intensive care unit. I knew nothing. So I did what any of us would do. I tried my best to look very busy and very important and picked up a clipboard. Put it down and come hold this baby. Before I knew it, the nurse who said this had physically yanked the clipboard from my hands, spun me around by my shoulders, popped me down into a rocking chair, and placed somebody else's baby right into my arms.
God, I love nurses.
There, she said, if you're going to be that baby's chaplain, that's what he needs you to do. Okay, I said, but what else am I supposed to do? Nothing, she said. There's nothing else you can do. You just hold him and love him and pray. It's true. When you're holding a baby, there's not much else you can do except just hold it and love it and pray. And honestly, the baby can't do all that much either. The two of you just sort of melt into one another. You just exist together. Whether you know it or not, he's now addressing his congregation on Christmas Eve. You have come here tonight for one thing and one thing only. You have come here to hold the baby. But be forewarned, my friends, for a night like this comes at great cost. To hold this baby, this Jesus whom we proclaim tonight, means you're going to have to put some things down. When you hold this baby, the warriors must put down their tramping boots and all their garments rolled in blood. The oppressors must put down their rods. The shepherds must put down their staffs. The judges must put down their gavels. The bankers their pencils. The surgeons their scalpels. The journalists their pens. The scholars their books. The janitors their brooms. The interns, their clipboards, the internet trolls, their keyboards, the leaders, their egos. When you and I hold this baby, when we hold this Jesus, everything else must fall away. Our cell phones, our distractions, our ambitions, our rights, our wrongs, our hurts, our grievances, our power. But here's the final twist. Here's the insane grace of it all. For all that you and I have to lay aside, for all the power we have to let go in order to hold this baby, the thing is, he has already gone first. Yeah, you have to give up a lot in order to hold a baby, but think of how much more you have to give up in order to be a baby. He's talking about Jesus, could have come any way he wanted, as a mighty warrior, a fearsome beast, as a petty king with swagger and prestige and power. But instead, this baby, this Jesus, came like this. Whatever it was he was doing, he put it down all those years ago, so he could come here and rest right there next to your beating heart.
Such a good sermon.
I mean, as hard as those people who preach not to hear it, just sort of admire the craft of it. But
Yeah.
it's a very simple. Anyone who has held a baby, even their own or someone else's, I also love the image of the 24-year-old who's sort of
my God.
wide-eyed and really wants to help
I know.
and wants to
Yeah.
feel. Most of all, he wants to feel like he's helping. He wants to be.
Yes.
He wants to be thought of almost as helping, and yet
Yeah.
his idea of how he can help versus how he actually is called to help,
Yeah.
what he's called to do, or what his role in the whole thing is such this beautiful picture of grace. You kind of can't believe it, and it really runs against the grain of my own personal impulses, not just his, but and as well as our everything we've been talking about this particular episode about time. When time does slow down, it's one of the frustrating things about having a baby is you just have to sit there. But it's also one of the great comforting things.
Yeah, one of the reasons I sent this to you is I actually was able to read this after Christmas, and I kind of hit a nerve with people in terms of our social media conversation in Advent, because I wrote just on my personal Facebook page, like the dummy that I am, that this Advent I didn't want. I just wrote a note to male preachers specifically because they tend to be, first of all, they preach more, but also they tend to be the ones that preach these sermons at Advent that are like, slow down, take quiet time, all these things that are utterly impossible for those of us who are like baking cookies, organizing Christmas pageants, buying everyone presents. And I got some really interesting messages from men. It was definitely proof that the wokest guys out there are the scariest. But it's true. Trust me, I have the proof. When you start to threaten a woke guy, boy, do they get riled up about their preaching. But what strikes me is that I stand by it. It is utterly impossible to slow down during Advent, and I'm not totally 100% sure that that's what the gospel is telling us. I think the gospel in Advent is the readings are so crazy and cosmic and disastrous and huge. And then they land in a manger. And it is only then when they land in a manger that I'm actually able to be quiet, that I'm actually able to slow down. And it is, in some ways, it struck me as sad when I realized, that Advent is a month long, basically, but Christmas is 12 days. And that I don't know, it's a weird emphasis to me sometimes that we have on this, like, an Advent, as we said, has become very sexy. And so, it's like Advent is in a big way. Everyone's doing Advent. But I wonder, when we came home from the holidays, I took Christmas stuff down and I bought myself like right before Christmas, um, uh, this little painting of a baby in a manger. I mean, you don't even see the face; it's just a tiny painting, and I put it on the windowsill where I'm always standing doing dishes. And I've kept it up, and I don't know that I want to take it down, like maybe until Easter. I don't know because there's this sense of like, no, this is actually when I can slow down enough to know what's
Hmm.
happened. I don't know.
I was realizing that last Christmas was actually one of the most peaceful, quiet Christmases my family has ever had. And the reason
Mm,
is because my dad died like a week before
yeah.
Christmas. And I think when you have a baby or when someone dies, it's the one of the only times in your life you have the freedom to lead an expectationless existence. No
It's
one
so true.
expects anything of you except just to be present. I don't know, man. Maybe this episode is about finding a way to let ourselves off the hook a little bit or let each other off the hook, which will never, ever happen, ever. But apparently, it actually does take an act of God, like the birth of a child or someone's death, to create that space. So that's what I was
No,
thinking of.
I think as much as God is found in silence and contemplation, I think the real hope of the gospel is that God is broken into time, into the noise and the sort of whirlwind of everyday life, and our total inability to slow down, and has kind of planted himself there as a baby almost. It's like, hold this,
Yeah,
see what
Mm,
happens. Like you can't,
abide in me,
you have to throw down
abide in
things
me.
that you're holding, and there are the moments where I don't know. I think that the gospel is simply is God's interruption into our frantic lives of proving and fear, and all the things that keep us awake at night. I always think of my dad's line where he's like, "No one wakes up in the middle of the night and said, 'Oh my gosh, what about Epiphany?'"
yeah.
No one has ever done that. Or
Yeah. I mean, I
what about the
know a few
Episcopal Church?
people.
What do I do?
Yeah.
It's like everyone is not thinking about that actually. They're thinking about, why does someone not.
How my kid still doesn't know how to swim. That's what I wake up thinking about. I keep thinking about Jim Gaffigan's
Yeah.
line where people say, like, what's it like to have is it a third baby or
A
something? And
fourth.
he's a fourth, and he says you're drowning and someone
baby.
hands you a
Yeah.
baby. And I think there's something really beautiful about this idea of that, like that, and then you give up and you drown. You know what I mean? And that actually is
In
what,
the waters of baptism.
yeah, that's actually what the grace of God feels like. That sanctification is you, succumbing.
Well, guys, this is the first episode of the decade. Any let me think. Any resolutions you have for the new year? I know that's like the least Mockingbird like question ever. But any sort of thoughts on any one moment maybe of the last decade? Last year we did the year, but any reflections on a decade past? I know it's all. Well, as Christians, I guess we believe there's something to the calendar.
I mean, it's crazy because I think about, so I was, oh my gosh, is this right? Is this math right? The decade began
Uh,
2010.
2010.
Yeah, so we were having our first child. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have anything. I mean, it just all feels really full and hard and sad and beautiful, and I'm kind of astonished that I get to keep being alive, which I know is like a weird way of putting it, but there's a woman in my life who has overcome one kind of cancer and now has another kind of cancer, and it's really, really aggressive, and she's got little kids. And I don't know, every time something like that happens, it's like it's just a miracle that even for as difficult as this feels and as broken as my reeds are and as dim as my light is, that I get to keep being here and in the midst of a world, right, where right now we're I feel like we were at one of those fever pitch moments when the rainforests are burning, and I feel like we're at a little bit of a fever pitch moment. It could be because I watch the Golden Globes and watch famous people shame each other for jets to California, but they were all talking about Australia and then the potential for war and everything. And it feels like we're in another one of those kind of fever pitch moments. And I don't know if it's age or wisdom or cynicism or the gospel, but I'm kind of at a place in my life now where I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? Like we're okay. We're like in a fever pitch again, and God is still good and Jesus still came and I have this family I get to love and raise, and I don't know. I feel like I said sort of nothing, but
It's a lot. What are you talking about? Yeah.
I didn't know what to say until you started talking, Sarah. And I think what I feel about the 2010s, this is just for me personally, is that this was the decade when things stopped going according to plan, like stopped going according to my plan. In
mhm.
2010, I was living in New York and had planted a church, and I think kind of thought I would be there forever. And that was like, that was my plan. That's how things were going to work out. And then we moved to Houston, which was definitely not my plan. Yeah, so when things stopped going according to my plan, but God was faithful anyway. And it's somewhere in there, it feels a little bit like I grew up, like
Mm.
became an adult a little bit more, like recognize that God is faithful and things are going to be okay and things are going to work out. And if I was to have a resolution for the next decade, it would be that, the next time I sort of things don't go according to plan or according to my plan, that I would just remember God's faithfulness and be able to sort of walk through that with a greater sense of peace and hope, as opposed to freaking out and desire for control and all that sort of stuff. And that's probably not going to happen. That's probably too much to ask.
Yeah, but I'll keep answering the phone, RJ.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
I
That's
won't.
right. Sarah, like, I'm sick of you.
That's my
I'm sick
resolution.
of you.
No more phone calls from RJ.
But that's-
yeah. Dave,
yeah.
what about you?
It's interesting. The 2010s we had our first child at the beginning of that. So I feel like almost it's been a, absolute cavalcade in my own life. Mockingbird was alive, but it was an almost unrecognizable form in 2010. Like it was Sarah. I don't think I'd even met you at that point.
No.
And I'm grateful for where it's come and I'm super grateful for my family and my wife and yet I look at the future and we just finished the future issue of the magazine, it just went to the printer. It was really hard to come up with stuff that we felt positive about going into the future on a large scale situation, because everything a lot of the other stuff that's out there right now is pretty doom and gloom, both on the Christian end and the non-Christian end. A lot of it's technologically based, some of it's political, and everything's basically things are only going to accelerate more. And so it's hard to think of but the challenge of that issue is to think about the future in positive terms and what can we say. And I had a moment this morning with a colleague who said, it could be that Dave, that you're on the internet too much, because everyone is thinking about these global forces when, people are the same, and there are men and women sitting around the breakfast table trying to figure out how they're going to get through the day, and the Lord shows up in these mundane little ways. Stop thinking about global statistics or movements of this, that, or the other, or attitudes that you're sensing, because God is actually working in small moments.
Yes.
And another person said, someone we interviewed, I don't know if this interview will go up in the episode that we do about the issue, but he said, it was Robin Sloan who said, do you have any predictions about the future? He said, there's too many factors. You cannot predict the future. It's going to be different in ways that it's going to turn out differently than anyone actually thinks, because there's too many ways. And I believe that the X factor is always the Holy Spirit. And so if you'd talked to me 10 years ago, I would have had no idea where it was going. And I can look back and say, what you always say to me, it's like, given how things have gone thus far, I think it's safe to put that next step forward, to keep showing up. And what else do we have in light of the gospel? It's just to suit up and show up. Isn't that what they say in AA? And so here's to another year of that. That's all I got.
That's
Love
good.
it. Suit up and show up.
All right.
Learn to knit.
Welcome to 2020. I hope you guys can see better.
Be better, try harder. Kevin Hart, here I come.
All right, guys.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by the Narrativo Group, and if you like what you've heard, please do drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. Until next time.